Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about 7 tips that every new Legion TD2 player should follow if they want to improve their gameplay. So we're going to have 3 basic notions which I'll use throughout the video, and then I'll get to the tips. The first notion is pushing. Pushing basically just means hiring more workers. If someone tells you that you should push, it means that you should spend some of your gold on hiring workers. And if someone tells you to stop pushing, it means that you shouldn't be hiring workers and should instead be building towers. The second is recommended value. Recommended value can be found in-game when you hover your mouse over the wave counter, or by using the info command in the chat box. Keep in mind that recommended value is flexible. That means that the recommended value shown will be higher if you haven't received any mercenaries from your enemies in the past few rounds, and it will keep increasing until your opponent sends mercenaries towards you, since that will increase the value you need in order to hold. The recommended value shown, therefore, might be higher in some games than in others on the same wave. However, the recommended value shown by typing the info command isn't affected and always just shows the normal base value for the wave. Finally, the third basic notion are the 2 currencies in the game. The first is gold. Gold is used to deploy fighters and to hire more workers. And mythium is the resource that your workers generate. Mythium is used to hire mercenaries and attack your opponents, which also grants you income. Every new wave you'll receive extra gold equal to the amount of income you have, so mythium is a way to further help your economy. That's why it's important that you spend some of your gold hiring workers, because if you don't, you won't be able to send too many mercenaries to your opponent and play offense in this tower defense game. That in turn means you'll have a low income and you won't be able to keep up with the recommended value in later waves, and you'll end up leaking. So now let's move on to the actual video. The first major tip that every new player should make is do not overbuild. Now, what is overbuilding? Overbuilding is building more than you need. Ideally, you want to hold early game waves with as few fighters alive as possible. If you do that, it means you've maximized the efficiency of your gold use, and we're able to hire more workers while still holding the wave. Of course, there are some exceptions to this rule, but that's basically the idea around it. You can also use the recommended value as an indication for when you might have built too much, but usually it's best to see for yourself, depending on how hard or easy you hold a wave. The second tip is have a good starting build. Early game waves are really important. I won't go too in-depth, and I'll try to keep it simple. 99% of the games have sends during the first 4 waves of the game, so ideally you want to start with a set of units or a unit which can hold a snail on wave 1 with either 3 or 4 workers, double snail or fiend or lizard on wave 2 with 4 workers, and then a brute or any other 60 mythium send on wave 3 with 4 workers. Finally, you'll want to be able to hold anywhere between 80 and 120 mythium on wave 4 with 4 workers, or ideally 5 workers. If your starting build has the potential to hold these sends on this amount of workers, you have a good start, which can hold any big send during the first 4 waves. Now, of course, if your build can push more workers while still holding these sends, you're in great shape. For example, if your starting build leaks to a brute on 3 with 4 workers, be sure that the enemies will know that, and you'll probably get sent a brute on wave 3 every single game until you adjust your build. The third tip: don't push workers while the enemy saves mythium. Only push workers after the enemy is sent. Now, this is as simple as it sounds. It's the golden rule of Legion TD2. If the enemies just sent you mercenaries on a certain wave, that means they won't be able to pressure you hard in the following wave, so you can put most of your gold into hiring workers. However, if they don't send any mercenaries into you, it's best to use all your gold to value up, so you can hold their big mercenary push on the wave they choose to send on. After you received that big push, then you can start pushing workers again and value up when they start saving again. If the enemies just income send mercenaries into you, if you hold, you can pretty much push a few workers every single wave, because you got fed by the gold bounty granted by killing the mercenaries. Tip number 4. Don't push too much. This can happen to new players early game, but it usually happens late game, where players fail to identify how many workers they're able to push. Even if the enemy's just sent and you most probably won't get pressured in the following waves, you have to keep in mind that you can't spend all your gold on workers, since the recommended fighter value gap between waves in mid and the late game is fairly large, and if you don't have enough income, you won't be able to get back on value. While you are new, you can use the recommended value shown by typing the info command for the next wave as a good reference point. For instance, if you received a send on wave 13 and you're currently on 2300 fighter value, you have to keep in mind that the recommended value for wave 14 is 2600. So you want to keep yourself around that value. Even if you might hold wave 14 with less value, say 2400, if your income is too low, you won't be able to get back on track to defend a send on wave 15, which has a recommended value of 3100. In high income games, this rule usually doesn't apply, since the incomes are so high you can easily recover your value, but those games are pretty rare. Tip number 5. Make sure you learn attack and armor types. Learning the attack and armor types is very important. It helps you hold some waves with lower value, it helps you to prepare for enemy sends, and it also helps you pick a good wave to send against your enemy if you scout their units. There's a few in-game features which help you understand these armor and attack types better, and also allow you to learn them faster. First, if you press F10, it opens the wave info table, which shows you the attack and armor type of each wave, and also the recommended attack and armor types you should get to hold these waves better. If you press F11, it opens the attack and defense table, which shows you the weaknesses and strengths of each individual attack and armor types in game. Finally, you can hover over the attack and armor type of any fighter to see which armor or attack type they counter. You can also use the info command to find out attack and armor type of a certain wave. The 6th tip, learn basic positioning. Positioning can be very difficult and complicated in this game, but it can also be very rewarding. Good positioning can make the difference between holding or leaking the wave. There are too many things to talk about, and there are many things that you have to learn on your own by playing the game, but I'll try to expose a few basics. First, make sure you put your tanks in front of your DPS units. This is pretty straightforward, as you want your tanks to take damage before your DPS units, so generally try to place your DPS behind your tanks. There is one exception to this rule that lets you hold melee waves better. That is, by placing your tanks behind any ranged DPS you have, even though your ranged units are in front, by the time the wave gets there, your melee tanks have time to get in front of the ranged units and tank the wave. Secondly, we have wave splitting. This is a bit more advanced, but you can basically split the wave in two by placing many fighters on the left and just a few on the right-hand side. This basically allows you to fight fewer creatures at once, since some of them will take some extra time moving towards the split, and they'll also take time by killing the fighters you use for the split, giving more time for your DPS to focus on the other half of the wave. Keep in mind there are times where a bad wave split can hurt you a lot, and you might leak in situations where you could have held. And splitting the wave is not recommended when you're using AoE units like Pyro or Honeyflower, which benefit from hitting the whole wave at once. Third, aura units. You really have to plan forward when you want to use an aura unit. Since an aura unit can buff a total of 6 other fighters, make sure you leave an open space for your auras, as well as plan what other fighters you want to be buffed by that aura unit. Finally, watch your lane. You can make adjustments for future games or even future waves by seeing how the creatures focus your fighters and how your wave split worked out. You can add extra tanks in different positions to switch the focus, or even just a few extra tier 1 fighters in different positions. Never underestimate the importance of tier 1 fighters. Sometimes they are the difference between holding and leaking. Finally, be friendly. This is one of the most important rules since this is a team game. Sharing strategies, opinions, and collaborating with your teammate grants you a significantly higher chance of winning the game. That being said, always try to be as friendly as possible with your teammate, and always be open to new ideas and strategies that your teammate comes up with. Really, Rosh? Fuck you.